We just got one of the biggest updates we've ever received from the developers about the future of the game, including information about ranged combat, Ark of Osiris changes, the commander release schedule, new infantry coming to the game, new museum buffs and commanders, getting those buffs. Stick around in this video because it's going to cover the future for Rise of Kingdoms. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming and today's video is sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms. And if you're already subscribed to the channel, we just spent the last 2 hours talking through the face-to-face Rock developer letter on stream. So if you haven't already subscribed, you should definitely do so you don't miss the latest and greatest news as soon as it happens. But the face-to-face with the developers have happened periodically throughout Rise of Kingdoms history, and this is the biggest so far by a long shot. And the reason is that there was an in-person event that took place, and I want to share with you everything that's in here. Use the timestamps in the description to navigate to whichever portion of this you're interested in, because this is probably going to be a longer video. This covers probably the next 6 to 12 months of big changes coming to the game. Now, on October 29th, the Rock development team invited a number of governors to Shenzhen for the inaugural Developer Roundtable. And unlike other offline events, the Roundtable aims to create a space for governors to talk with the Rock team face-to-face, not only to learn more about the new content, but to directly convey their issues and suggestions with the game. During the event, the producer of the game introduced new Rock content currently under development, had an in-depth discussion with the invited governors about a number of issues. Below, we've recapped the event. So this is a big deal. Please keep in mind, this is in development, but it's not guaranteed that this will be exactly as it's described here. Okay, the legalese out of the way. Let's get into the hot stuff, right? Future development plans, new mechanic, auxiliary commanders. One of the new gameplay features we're developing is called Auxiliary Commanders. The basic idea is to provide you with more freedom to customize the skills on your favorite commanders. We've designed the gameplay aspects of the mechanic and currently plan to include it in next year's new stories. Now, what this means to me is that one or more new KvK formats will have auxiliary commanders as described here. So what does it do? The concept is similar to Season of Conquest story Heroic Anthem, where you can acquire equipable support skills by completing bastion quests. Like in Heroic Anthem, this mechanic will let you use commanders you already own as auxiliary commanders, allowing you to take one of their passive skills and equip it to another commander. We're also considering increasing the number of equipable support skills in Heroic Anthem from 2 to 3. Now, interestingly, players that already use 7 marches on the open field don't really benefit much from this change because they're already using probably all of the support skills. But if you're free to play, then you may benefit pretty substantially because you may be bringing fewer marches, and now you can have more of those marches, potentially have 3 support skills, whereas a pay-to-win player is going to cap out by having 2 skills on lots of different commanders. So if you bring a smaller number of marches to the field, it is an advantage to then take 3 support skills and be able to deploy them, assuming you've got those 3 skills to deploy. So they say, for example, with this system, you can take 1 passive skill from Lubu and a passive skill from Julius Caesar, and then equip them to Artemisia. If you then assign Artemisia as the primary commander of a troop, that troop will benefit from all of her skills plus the passive skills of Lubu and Caesar. You can equip up to 3 additional skills this way. This mechanic is currently undergoing internal testing and is subject to change. We're also experimenting with the direction of governor versus environment gameplay, where multiple governors can challenge bosses on the world map. So world map bosses is an interesting idea. I could get into that. And that's like almost like a whole entirely separate idea from what they were talking about up here. But let's just key into a couple of things they said here. One is that I wonder if specific commanders can only have other specific commanders have their support skills applied. So they keep, they give this example of Artemisia and Lubu and Caesar. I wonder if Artemisia will only be able to have like Lubu and Caesar's support skills, not like any commander's support skills. Maybe they're preventing any one commander from getting like too crazy. Because like, I don't know, you take Tamaris' support skill, you put it on a certain commander, it could be completely busted. But this does have several implications for those of you that want to prepare for this. One is that if you've been saving money like me and not buying the daily special offer, you might consider starting to pick that up again if you're really into this potential format. So, for example, I've been chilling on Thutmose. I don't really feel like I need him for the open field, but if Thutmose ends up being an auxiliary commander and his support skills could be really good, okay, I mean, you have my attention. Maybe I should work on Thutmose. Maybe that's something that I'll go and do. Overall, I think this could be pretty exciting. Again, players that have fewer marches, now putting 3 support skills onto a commander will really benefit a lot. So I think that could be pretty cool. Ark of Osiris strategy adjustment. This is a big one. So I've said a number of times, I feel like Ark could use, I don't know, something to keep it more dynamic and exciting. The Ark of Osiris event has undergone a few changes since its launch, barring the occasional balance adjustments. The only big change they've done, by the way, is when they added skills to the game mode. Those skills are really powerful, but we haven't really seen a lot of a shakeup since the release of those skills. The current meta focuses mostly on competing for the Ark, gathering, and stronghold combat. In order to enhance the strategic element of the Ark of Osiris, we're currently working on the following changes. Adding new NPC enemies to the center of the map, similar to the boss in Ceroli. Defeating this enemy will grant the victors combat buffs and points. We don't yet know if the buffs are for like the rest of the match or for a short period of time, but either way, I think this could be pretty cool. I played a lot of Heroes of the Storm back in the day, and there were PvE objectives that you had to decide, like, is now the right time to go for a PvE objective, or do we need battle other players? Or you have a big battle against other players at the same time that you battle the PvE objective. I think there's a lot of cool possibilities there. We're also trying to replace the Ark with a new type of stronghold to fight over. Winning a certain number of victories in this battle for the stronghold will summon powerful mercenaries to fight for you. So PvE guardians that fight for you is pretty cool. In Heroes of the Storm, which I played back in the day, when you defeated a boss, it would come and fight on your behalf, which was pretty cool. And in addition, we're considering adding a fog system similar to Champions of Olympia in order to make visibility and scouting more important. Now, I think this also is pretty cool because when you can see everything the enemy is doing, there's like no surprises, right? Like, you know the enemy is going for the Ark in the middle, so you probably are going to the Ark too. You can't surprise the enemy by being like, well, we didn't go to the middle. We took all your structures. Gotcha. So you committed to the middle, right? You can't do anything like that because you have perfect information. So I think it could be really cool to add some sort of like fog of war where if your troops aren't there, you can't see what's happening. And this is something we've talked about before on the channel, which I think is a cool idea. Let's go to the next thing here, the future direction of ranged combat. Now, ranged combat is technically here in the power-up version of KvK, but I mean, it's here, but like, I personally would like to see more happen with ranged combat, so here we go. We're also trying to make some major updates to the underlying combat framework in order to incorporate ranged combat and blocking, so physically stopping where an enemy can go into the game. In the past, large battles in Rise of Kingdoms have involved both sides amassing their troops on one side, hitting each other until one side wins. Yeah, you basically club your enemy over the other, over the head until they give up, right? This could get very repetitive and tiresome. We're looking to get away from this style of combat to expand the front line, as they say, for Rise of Kingdoms battles. Likewise, in the future, we want to provide a more in-depth historical battlefield experience. For example, adding field fortifications or barricades in many real-life situations was very important, so they want to replicate that in-game. In a similar vein, walls could serve as a more costly kind of barrier, which may necessitate attackers use siege weapons to try to destroy them and force the defenders into a pitched battle. So they're alluding to the idea that siege weapons may have more value like they did in history, which I think could be cool. It'll all depend on how they implement this. The thing to keep in mind is that we still really need fast-paced gameplay. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be able to set up for a fight. I'm just saying the gameplay needs to be fast. And when you look at a game mode like March of the Ages, which was, really not successful, I think the thing we take away from that is that people want to be able to get into the action quickly. So as long as you can get into this action quickly, which it doesn't seem like they're saying anything why you wouldn't, I think this could be pretty cool. A lot of how fun this will or will not be will depend on the implementation. So I will say, however, that we already have barricades in another Lilith game, and that is Call of Dragons. I'll have a card up in the top if you haven't seen this. I have covered this on the channel. You can put a physical barricade that you build on the map, and the enemy has to go around it or fly over it. Now, there's no flying in Rise of Kingdoms, so let's jump to the next topic here, which is hero types and updates. This is big news for those of you that are into infantry. We'll be making a series of changes to how new commanders are added, starting with adjusting events. In the Wheel of Fortune event, in addition to existing leadership-type commanders, you will be able to select new range commanders. So we're getting big confirmation here that range-specific commanders will at some point make their way into the game. The Mightiest Governor event will remain the same, and you should be able to select a new leadership commander. Those leadership commanders will always be a garrison or rally type as well. In addition, whenever a new ranged commander is added, they will be accompanied by a ranged combat theme event, which will allow you to experience ranged combat for yourself. By taking part in these events, you will be able to acquire other ranged commanders. We hope you enjoy them. So this is very interesting. Ranged commanders, it's official. They are coming to the game. Now, we don't know if that means specific equipment. I don't know if you can apply, like, do your ranged commanders, can you have infantry ranged? Is this a thing? Is a ranged commanders going to be siege only? We don't yet know. For those of you who like leadership commanders, not to worry, we'll still be adding new leadership commanders for a long time to come. The next one is planned to be released after the 7th Gen Infantry Commander update. So this is big news. I was saying in previous videos, I was like, hey, what's the future of leadership commanders and all this leadership equipment I have? Good news. We haven't seen leadership for a while, but it is on the way. Let's go now to the commander release schedule and museum updates over the past year in the China server. This is very important. This is the China server. We released new generations of commanders every 3 months. Some governors have reported that this creates too much time pressure to upgrade commanders before new ones come out. This is true. Many of you have said, hey, the commanders come out too quickly. I can't actually collect a lot of stuff and enjoy all the things that are being put in game. I feel like I'm always behind. Now, for those of you that didn't know, there are separate Chinese servers that operate in some ways differently from the US servers. Keep this in mind. Now, I think they're talking specifically about Chinese servers for some of this stuff. We'll talk about that in a second. As such, starting from the 6th generation Cavalry Commander update, we will extend the interval between new commander generations to around 7 months. The schedule of commander-related events, like the Mightiest Governor and Wheel of Fortune, will not change. And then in parentheses, they say specific to the China server. I don't think in the US we're going to see this change to 7 months. I think they're going to test it there in China, in the Chinese server. And then if it's good, I guess, maybe we'll get that as well. So pump the brakes on all servers getting this. I think they're saying it's the Chinese server because they put specific to the China server in parentheses. Also, we will continue to update the museum. The purpose of the museum system is to be able to provide ways for old commanders to take the field. We're adding a 2nd generation of commanders to the museum. Let me tell you now who I think this is going to be because I think it's obvious. It is going to be Constantine and Alexander the Great. It is going to be Saladin, and it is going to be Khan. It is also going to be Edward of Woodstock and Tamaris. That is going to be your next generation of commanders. Those are the commanders from KvK Seasons 1 through 3 that are really not all that good in Season of Conquest KvKs. We can acknowledge that. The developers are going to put buffs to them. Also, maybe Wu Zetian. I don't think she's in the museum buffs already, is she? She also would be a great candidate for getting a museum buff. I would actually love to see that. And also, honestly, I feel like you could give Charlemagne another buff. You could give him like another round of buffs and that would be okay. There is a lot more to talk about though. Next up, when will the 7th generation infantry commanders come out? How powerful will they be? What are your plans for leadership commanders going forward? Infantry commanders were relatively underpowered in the past few generations due to some balancing issues with earlier commanders. Combining certain powerful commanders and other existing powerful commanders would create unexpected and overpowered combinations. Do you know what's really unfortunate? Is I feel like I never figured out what those combinations are. I mean, we know Guan and Leo is really good, but like, it's not so busted. So I wonder which commander pairing they're referring to. Like, what thing did we not figure out as players where they're like, this thing is so good we can't even release powerful infantry? I don't know what it is. I don't. We plan on releasing 7th generation infantry commanders in late December or January of next year. One will focus on field, the other on sieges. By that, they mean, I think, rallying. The strength will be on par with other 7th gen commanders and will be more than enough for all your infantry needs. Yo, if you are an inf simp like me, get hyped. We are going to clap some cheeks with the new infantry. In the early days of Rock, leadership commanders were higher tier, but as the meta shifted to single troop types, the role of leadership commanders became less clear. We will be rethinking the role of leadership commanders, most likely in a similar fashion to garrison commanders. We will also continue to add new leadership commanders, with the next one being added after the 7th generation of infantry commanders. So I think we're getting infantry, and then after infantry, we're getting leadership. So get hyped. We've got new commanders coming into the game. If you're an inf player, there's going to be a lot to be excited about here. Off-season KvK content is boring. What a great question here. Champions of Olympia and Tempest Clash really just aren't as fun. Can we get more off-season events and activities? So this is a good question. The off-season is not why you play Rise of Kingdoms. You play Rise of Kingdoms for the KvKs. And the time in between is kind of boring relative to certainly when you're in KvK. Firstly, we are aware of the issues like game modes of Champions of Olympia, the current state of which does not match our intended design. We're considering reworking the gameplay and the changes to matchmaking systems, rewards, and other aspects. In addition to reworking old events, we will continue adding events and activities to get you through the drought period, so stay tuned. Yeah, you know, in my live stream chat where we talked about this stuff, and I will remind you of that, because if you want more information about everything we're talking about here, you can go really in-depth with our live stream where we spent 2 hours talking about this stuff. But I think the thing that's kind of interesting here is the other alternative will be to reduce the downtime we need between KvKs by, I don't know, giving us half our resources back when KvK is over, right? Like giving us a higher percentage of troops back, giving us some speed ups back or something. What I'm trying to say is like the other approach is to just make it so we queue up for KvK faster. Okay. Now I get that KvK is kind of a big event that's really time consuming and there's separate issues with that, but the two approaches are give us events to, give us something to do in between, or to just reduce the downtime between KvKs. Now, matchmaking for KvK is not good, this question says. With frequent collusion and match fixing between combatants, will you consider matching kingdoms based on victories or total points? Also, can kingdoms that have just unlocked Season of Conquest receive newbie protection? Which actually is a great idea. I am on board for that. We're aware of this issue, though we can't give you a definitive answer to the first question just yet. But our team is planning to be setting up a task group to investigate. And honestly, like, if they change the KvK matchmaking, they really shouldn't tell us what they change about it, because people will just try to manipulate it. I recently made a video where someone tried to manipulate the KvK matchmaking. Didn't work out in their favor. And I think Lilith is already looking at this stuff and have probably already implemented some things and just don't say what they are because they don't want to broadcast, here's how you break our KvK matchmaking, right? In addition, for kingdoms that have just unlocked Season of Conquest, we will be adjusting the matchmaking algorithm to keep them separated from kingdoms that have participated in multiple Seasons of Conquest. This is really good. This feature is currently being tested. It should be online soon. That is a great change. The reason that this is necessary is that, like, you're so far behind on commanders, in part because they really need to get these additional museum buffs out, but in part because even with them, it's not going to be enough. You're so far behind on the meta, you really need more time. So to fight against other kingdoms in a similar state as you, I think is a big win. Next up is something I have been asking for a fix for a long time. The fortress stacking tactic, i.e. when an alliance builds multiple forts around a choke point is overpowered. Will you consider changing how this mechanic works? We've discussed modifying this mechanic, but the process of doing so, we found that changing this may be more complicated than we expected. As such, we can't definitively say how we'll be rolling out this change at a certain time. But if we plan on making this change, we will be sure to let the community know. Look, there's a simple answer here for how you fix forts, in my opinion. The simple answer is you cannot build a fort on top of another fort's footprint. I think it's that simple. And once a player starts building a fort, you cannot build another fort on that footprint, even if the fort is not finished building. Today, what you do is you manipulate the fact that you can build on top of either existing fort territory that's already built, or you can use different alliances and you can use flags and manipulate territory to like create open spaces to build forts on top of each other. There's a more complicated explanation for that, but you can literally have 3 to 4 forts almost one tile away from each other. It's just so repetitive. So I think they really need to take a look at this. It's very important. And if they can get rid of fort stacking, I think we can all agree that's a huge win. In KvK gameplay, non-combat alliances tend to have the worst experience. We talked about this on stream. I'm really going to encourage you to check out the stream because it was a lot of fun. But like, what is a non-combat alliance in Rise of Kingdoms? Hello? Every alliance is contributing to the KvK matchmaking. Every player is contributing to the KvK matchmaking. If you're in the top 300 by power, you contribute. So you either fight or you're dead weight. There's no in between. Like, there's actually no in between. You're either contributing or you are a not contributor. And like, giving resources is not enough to justify being 150 million power. It just isn't. I don't even know what the number would be if you're not fighting, like you're not helping. So, yeah, I don't know what this non-combatant is, but anyways, we've already observed governors organizing their own interesting activities during community events. We're also considering adding large-scale events that will require participation of all alliances to encourage non-combat alliances. I don't know what this is, to participate in inter-alliance activities. We're also developing more story subsystems like seasonal strategies, which the subsystem planned for the King of the Nile story, we hope will allow governors in non-combat alliances to contribute more to the power of their kingdoms. You either send your troops to die and you field fight, or you're dead weight compared to someone who is. So I think that it would be cool, maybe, if they made a system for somebody to opt out of the next KvK queue, and they're flagged as such in an official capacity, and then a kingdom can decide, I don't need to zero you, right? Because you actually are flagged for, you're not hurting us, right? You're not actively harming our kingdom. Okay, cool. I think there's probably a way to look at that. I don't know what the answer is. Non-combat alliances. Let's go to the next question here. Will there be more game merch like figurines? Well, the answer is yes. More merch is a part of our current production plan. We will be adding figurines, commander figurines, models for certain castle skins, a means of customizing certain merch. Once we have more information, we'll make an announcement. War Daddy, Chad and I talked about this on stream. If they made a rock chessboard, I will buy it. I will absolutely buy it. I would love to teach my daughter chess on a IRL physical rock chessboard. I am in. You have my attention. They're not saying they're making a chessboard. I'm telling you I want one. Okay, here we go. Up next, there is constantly new KvK content coming out, but older events like Ark of Osiris aren't changing. Since you have all these new game mechanics, are you going to change the older events? They did talk about this earlier. Yes, we're considering it, and we believe that adding new mechanics to older events could breathe fresh life into them. For example, in Ark of Osiris, we may consider adding mechanics like capture multiple strongholds to earn buffs. This all sounds really good to me. I feel like they could do some really cool stuff with Ark, so I am hyped. Sometimes when your city is being attacked and is rallied by an army, even if the power of your garrison far outstrips the power of the rallied army, your city takes a ton of damage. Clearly way more than it should. Will this be fixed? This is a very good question. And at the end of this video, we're not there yet, I will remind you to go watch the Solomar zeroing video, where he starts at 400 million power and he drops like 80 million power in the first round of rallies. It's insane. Something happens when you're defending your city. Let me read the explanation. When defending a city, there's a limit to how much normal and counterattack damage you can do. This limit is designed so that your rallies on big cities are more balanced, preventing attackers from being wiped out in a single round. As a result, however, city defenders who mostly rely on normal and counterattack damage are at somewhat of a disadvantage here. Now, your skill damage does scale up, by the way, with the number of troops in your city. This is why I have mentioned in other videos, subscribe if you haven't already, because you want to know this kind of stuff, that if you are a higher power city, commanders like Esong suddenly become a lot more powerful because boosting your skill damage scales with your city being really high power. So whales were using Esong for a very long time as their secret tech for defending their city. After taking a comprehensive look at the combat system, however, we found that the core reason for the weakness of garrisons is the relative lack of new mixed troop garrison commanders and the obvious difference in power between older and newer commanders. So they did mention that leadership commanders aren't really up to snuff these days, which is true. So they are aware of this, and they say, as such, our current plan is to resolve the issue of mixed troop garrisons taking too much damage by adding new garrison type commanders and equipment. Hello? So this could be really interesting for like mixed troops equipment, mixed troops commanders, could be very, very, very powerful. During this roundtable update, our governors provided us tons of helpful suggestions and feedback, such as a button to send out 7 marches at once, which by the way is a bad idea. It's not going to be fun to walk by somebody's city. You literally could never walk by somebody's city. If you could send all your marches out at once and hit a player, it'd be too busted. The new city skins don't look good, not enough community guides, promote Ark of Osiris League more, rework leadership commanders, and so much more. We can't list them all, but we are carefully considering all suggestions received at the event. Some of them will likely be incorporated into the game. This developer roundtable was a huge help to the entire Rise of Kingdoms team. Not only did we receive a bunch of valuable advice, but also the event has served as a helpful temperature check for the state of our player base. We're already preparing another roundtable to be held in another city. We're hoping that through these roundtables, we will get more perspectives and through these suggestions, make Rock a better game for all. I feel like this is far and away the most satisfying and complete Q&A that they have ever done. Because even if you don't like every change, it feels like they have given us so much clarity into the direction of the game and where things are headed. And if you want to give feedback, I feel like historically they have sometimes listened to the feedback and changed around the sort of path that they're going to take. So I think it's a very good idea that the developers share early and often what they are thinking, give us an opportunity to be like, yeah or nah, and then they can make a choice as to like, okay, maybe we should or should not do this. And I think a lot of what's in here sounds really cool. So if you're looking forward to a lot of this stuff, you should really subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the latest and greatest video that goes live as soon as the content lands. And also, if you want to see way more in-depth conversation, we had Cortex and War Daddy Chad in voice. There'll be a card here for that stream in just a moment in the end screen. And also, if you want to see Solomar getting zeroed, where you can really see the effect of like, man, not only does he have bad commanders, but he's losing like 80 million power per volley, like per round of rallies on his city. That card will be up here as well. That is, I think, exactly what they were talking about with why it is that a high power city can get wrecked. You can see it for yourself. Cards in the end screen in just a second.